Hello again, Peter Saturday from Universal Dork back again today. We're talking about Gremlins and Ghoulies and little monster movies. So I wanted to talk about some of the Gremlin ripoff films, all the movies that were supposedly inspired by Gremlins and are kind of like, I guess they don't get much respect because they're sort of like Gremlins clones. So the last video we kind of talked about Ghoulies. I would say Ghoulies is one of the main films that always gets compared to Gremlins. And there are similarities, especially in some of the sequels of the Ghoulies. But as we were talking about in the last video, Ghoulies is kind of its own original idea. And I really appreciate that about it. So some other films that have been kind of touted as, you know, like Gremlins ripoff films, or Gremlins clones, or movies that were heavily inspired by the Gremlins. One of the best of the bunch with Gremlins, Ghoulies, I would say like the big three is Critters. So Critters is a film that I know a lot of people love. Now that one I don't even really think is very underrated. Everyone can kind of agree that Critters from 1986 is just a super awesome, super solid, super fun little monster film. And I really like that film, aside from the critters just looking fantastic and their design looking really great with all their like porcupine quills and how they roll around. They're some of the coolest little monsters out there. I also really like the fact that Scott Grimes, a pretty underrated actor, super charismatic. I always compare him to kind of like a B-level, like Michael J. Fox style guy. He's got the red hair. He's been in a lot of really cool stuff, or, I mean, the first two Critters and that movie Nightlife that I talked about here, absolutely love that. So I really like that guy, Scott Grimes. He was on an episode, I think, of like the Twilight Zone, 1980s Twilight Zone as well, but he kind of carries the first two films. And those films, they're so much fun, really great horror comedies with some really super fun special effects as well. Can't say enough about that. And also, the first Critters actually features Billy Zane in one of his first roles. Now, Billy Zane appeared in the original Back to the Future as one of the goons that kind of hangs around with Biff. Kind of like you blink and you might miss him because he doesn't really have any like speaking lines in there. He's just sort of hanging around with those guys. But he returns in Critters and kind of like starts showcasing his abilities as an actor. So really like seeing him in here. Always forget that he's in Critters until I throw that thing on. And then, you know, Critters 2, kind of renowned as quintessential Easter horror film because of the Easter setting of Critters 2. Critters 2, super solid, got the fun like bounty hunters, all of that stuff going on. And then I just really wanted to mention from 1991, Leonardo DiCaprio's first feature film role and first leading role as well. He carries the third Critters movie. Now that's something a lot of people have totally forgotten about, that Leonardo DiCaprio is the star of Critters 3, and that one is a lot of damn fun too. That one takes place in an apartment complex. It's got him moving in there. I think it's just with his dad. He moves in there and he meets a girl that he likes. The critters attack inside of the apartment complex, and it's kind of got that whole, that 80s trope of, you know, the people inside of an apartment building of all different like ethnicities and all of this, and they're all having to sort of like team up together to defeat a common threat. That movie is a ton of fun. I don't think that the third Critters gets talked about enough. So check that one out for little Leonardo DiCaprio action, since he's kind of been in some real popular movies again. And then of course, Critters 4, which I still have never seen. I've heard really bad things about Critters in space. Basically, I think it has like Angela Bassett in it and like some kind of a weird cast. So someday I'll check it out. I'm not in a hurry. And then of course, there was some more like modern Critter stuff. Critters Attack with like Dee Wallace in it. More of like modern sequel from, I don't know if it was like 2017 or 2019. I can't remember, but I did see that and had a lot of fun with that movie as well. And then I think that there was actually a Critters like series, like it might have been one season. Still need to check that out and see what that one was all about. And of course, as I've mentioned earlier, Troll from 1986, which I've talked about in a lot of other videos that I've done, because I absolutely love that movie. Saw that one in the theater way back in the day. I've been a gigantic fan of Trolls, one of the best little monster movies out there as well, and directed by John Carl Buechler with his special effects. And a lot of people have this theory that and have accused Troll of using some of the actual Ghoulies puppets, like recycling them. Apparently, if you look very closely, people claim that you can see the Ghoulies in the actual Troll movie. Now, I haven't paid that much attention to that because I only recently discovered that people have this theory that the Ghoulies are recycled in there. I wouldn't be surprised though, because like I said in my last video, John Carl Buechler's Troll Now, he did also the effects and stuff in Ghoulies. They feel like they exist in the exact same universe, and I absolutely love that about them. In fact, I'm just going to say I think that they do. I think that they all exist in a shared universe. Another funny thing about Troll is that the main character's name is Harry Potter Jr., which is very strange. Now, J.K. Rowling has gotten accused of ripping off that character from Troll because of all of the magic that's involved, and like the little kid, the main character, who is Atreyu from The Neverending Story, actually. And apparently John Carl Buechler was supposed to make some sort of like sequel or remake or series. I think it was called Troll, The Rise of Harry Potter Jr. I think in 2015, and then Warner Brothers totally like came at him like saying, J.K. Rowling will come after you for, ripping off Harry Potter, when in fact, John Carl Buechler's original Troll featured the original Harry Potter. Whether you like it or not, that's the truth. And of course, we get even into more lesser known, more low budget films of the early 90s. There's some of these as well, and the late 80s, but we've got one that I've never seen before. I've heard it's not very good, but a movie called Beasties from 1991, which apparently involves some sort of like alien creatures. Maybe it's a little more of like a Critters ripoff, but like alien creatures, a punk rock cult, and a bunch of like numbnut teenagers driving around and having to face off against these beastie alien little monsters that descend upon them. I'll eventually check that out because right now I'm sort of like feeling the little monster craze, having covered all of this stuff with Gremlins and Ghoulies and rewatching Ghoulies. I kind of want to like check all of these off the list. So let me know in the comments if you've seen Beasties before and if you think that I should check that shit out. Now, another film that falls into the Gremlins ripoff, sort of like Little Monsters movie, is the 1993 film Little Devil's the Birth. Not a really great movie, but I kind of like it for some reason. It features Mark Price. If you're a fan of the movie Trick or Treat from, I think Trick or Treat, was that 1985, 1986? The one with Ozzy Osbourne and Gene Simmons. Trick or Treat, one of the best 1980s horror films in my opinion. Love that film. Mark Price, also known as Skippy Handelman from Family Ties, stars in this film as well. He is the main character, the leading man in Little Devils. This movie, as kind of shitty as it is, I think is a lot of fun. This has like some little monsters, from what I remember, that are made from this weird like satanic sludge or like mud that's at the bottom of this like apartment complex that Skippy lives at. And I think that there's someone in the apartment complex. I don't know if it's a landlord, this like older woman that's totally after Skippy. He's like always rejecting her. It's kind of one of those things where it's like Jack Tripper and the character Lana from Three's Company, where kind of like, I don't know what your problem is. Maybe you should just go for it, Skippy, because you're probably not getting too many other offers, and the offer on the table doesn't look too bad.
And I will do anything, no matter how degrading, humiliating.
Anyway, there is like this scientist who's creating these weird little devils out of the clay, this like sludgy clay that's down there. And they come to life and of course they cause all sorts of problems all over the apartment complex. And it ends up being Skippy having to kind of rise to the occasion and team up with some other people to take care of these creatures. Now, normally there would be nothing wrong with an absolutely like shitty movie starring Mark Price, but this is one of those movies that is a lot of fun. It's got a lot of great characters, but it's about 20 minutes too long. I think this one runs about like an hour and 40 minutes. Realistically, this should probably be like 80 minutes long. Tops, an hour and a half, but really 80 minutes. Someone should actually do like some sort of like cut of this movie. Maybe I'll do that someday and put that on my YouTube channel or something like that, like a cut of Little Devils. Because if you cut like 20 minutes out of this film and a lot of other films from like the 1980s, if they were like 10 to 15 to 20 minutes shorter, they would be absolute cult classic gems. Little Devils does have enough going for it that it's most definitely worth a watch if you're a fan of the little monster genre. And it should also be noted that Little Devils was directed by this guy named George Pavlo, who did a movie, kind of a popular one amongst people, into like the cult stuff of the 80s, called Rawhead Rex, which I'd never really been a gigantic fan of. I do love the cover of that movie, though. I'd say like Little Devils might be a little bit better than Rawhead Rex. And then, of course, in 1987, we got Munchies, another kind of video store film. The cover's sort of like iconic. It's got this sort of like sleazy little like gremlin style guy like grabbing onto a lady's leg in a skirt, and he's like, obviously not acting very PC. That behavior, that Munchie would be obviously now canceled very quickly. There'd be pictures of him all over Instagram and Facebook and articles written on that guy. So he needs to calm the fuck down. And I think this one was actually rated PG, so it's not as sleazy and raunchy as the cover might lead you to believe. I don't remember this one being particularly too memorable, featuring some like little creature that's like brought from another country. I think it's like Peru or something. And when it's like chopped up into pieces, it grows into munchies. And it did spawn like a sequel, I believe, called Munchie, just like one. They don't really look very similar, but apparently those two are related in some way. I don't think I've ever actually seen Munchie, the sequel. And then, of course, in 1988, we get a movie called Hobgoblins, which is another film kind of similar to Munchies. These films are both kind of known for the incredibly inept filmmaking and just like terrible puppetry. And not even terrible puppetry, it's just like the puppets, like their mouths barely even move. So you're just sort of like looking at almost like someone moving around a couple like dolls or something. Very disappointing with Munchies and Hobgoblins. And Hobgoblins, widely regarded as one of the worst films of all time. It was actually featured on Mystery Science Theater 3000 in one of their more popular episodes where they, rip on it. I mean, I feel like that's maybe what this movie was made for, is just to be ripped on. Hobgoblins, so bad, I think it had a $15,000 budget. They kind of squeezed as much as they could out of it and just made a really shitty movie. Although I do think maybe I need to give that a rewatch without the Mystery Science Theater 3000 riffing going on. But I remember that one being almost like so bad it's bad, and rather than so bad it's good. So that was another one that was sort of like somewhat popular at the video store back in the day. And then, of course, I also wanted to mention another movie that I bought on Blu-ray not too long ago, ended up reselling it, from 1985, called Attack of the Beast Creatures. It takes place in the 20s, and these people end up stranded on an island, which I love that concept of being stranded on an island. That wins me over right away. And then the beast creatures live on this island. Now, these creatures look like the Zuni fetish warrior doll from Trilogy of Terror 1 and 2. They look very similar to that. The one from Trilogy of Terror is much better in the way that it moves and the way that the people are doing the puppetry with it. This one, fine for what it is. It's another ultra low budget little monster movie that was obviously kind of being influenced by that craze from back in the day. So I'm not sure, maybe I'm missing some other major contenders of the little monsters genre. There's other films that feature, similar things like Puppet Master and stuff like that, but I consider that like, part of the killer doll genre. But, technically you could put in like Puppet Master or Dolls into this category as well. And then I figured I'd just mention this film that I just watched by myself. I actually watched it on a projector, so it felt like real cinematic. This little film from 2002 with Malcolm McDowell I saw on the cover, and then this like monster here. I wasn't really sure what to make of this, but it looked kind of like right up my alley. And I was actually pretty impressed with this for this sort of like a weird, cheapy movie. Maybe it was like a Sci-Fi Channel movie or something like that. But this fits into the genre we're talking about, little monsters. It's basically like little trolls that live in this house. This family moves into the house, terrorized by these little like goblin troll guys. Now, this sort of seems like it could have been a sequel to the final segment in Cat's Eye. It's very much, the look of the monsters is very much like that little guy in there. These guys are really fucking cool looking. They've got like the little goblin like troll outfits on, kind of like that guy did. That guy is one well-dressed goblin in Cat's Eye. And this feels kind of like a spiritual sequel to it, though it's not nearly as good, but it's definitely worth like a weird watch. If you're looking for something that no one's probably ever going to be talking about this film, no one that I know ever even saw this movie, but pretty well done effects here. The little monsters in this film look really great. Kind of like maybe a little bit of the Gate thing going on here. Not nearly as gory and like crazy as I was hoping it would be, but for like a, sort of like one-off weirdo DVD find at a thrift store, pretty fucking cool. The finale really kind of kicks things into high gear. You get some pretty cool like troll goblin action there, like mini monster guys. In like, sets where everything's like, looks like it's made, like miniature, like maybe like a giant shoe. I feel like there's a little bit of that going on here too. So Inhabited from 2002, rando DVD find. Kind of liked it. So yeah, if you're looking for some little monster movies from the 80s and 90s, you may want to check some of these ones out that I recommended right here. All right, that's it for me today. I will see you soon.